Kathy, Business Development Manager at PESI, and I have had the honor of working with Deb for about 5 years now, and it's always a delight. For more information regarding CE and other exciting learning opportunities from Deb, check out your portal. Without further ado, and the reason why you're here, let me introduce you to Deb Dana, a clinician, consultant, and author of 7 essential books. Deb's work translates polyvagal theory into accessible applications for relationships, mental health, and trauma. She is well known for pioneering the rhythm of regulation methodology, tools, techniques, and practices which continue to open the power of polyvagal to professionals and curious people from diverse backgrounds from all walks of life. Welcome, Deb. Thank you so much for being here. And as I was giving my intro, I was just thinking about how our shares have gone well beyond our work. So I feel like I can safely call you a dear friend.
Absolutely.
And I'm so thrilled to have you here.
Yeah, it is lovely to be here. I'm in Maine at the moment, and it is a beastly hot day, and I'm okay because I think stillness might be a good thing to find at this moment, right?
Yeah. Absolutely. Yes, and it's warm where I'm at as well. So just wanted to let our audience know that we're going to hold Q&A till the end. So Deb's going to pop on and let me know, and then I will, facilitate the Q&A. So with that, I'll just go back into the background. Have fun.
All right, we will. Oh, so welcome everybody. It's lovely to know that we are all here together. We're going to explore pathways to stillness. So I appreciate you showing up today. We're from wherever you are in the world. I'm going to share my screen so that we can do this together. I love images. So even as we begin to start, I want you to just take a moment and see how this image lands for you. This was an image that really felt safely still to me. So you can just sort of notice what happens to you when you see this image. All right. So again, some of the wonderful people who support my work, thank you to all of them. And just this background slide about polyvagal theory that's my dear friend, colleague, Steve Porges developed a long time ago now. That we were just talking earlier this morning. It's, half a century ago. Isn't that crazy to think about? And we keep learning more about the nervous system. We learn more all the time. There's research going on. There's studies going on. So there's a lot we still don't know. And yet, polyvagal theory has stood the test of time, right? Hundreds of peer-reviewed articles and papers have referenced Steve's work. Steve's work is now being used in across multiple disciplines. And some of you may bump into the controversy, the discussion that goes on in the academic and scientific world about polyvagal theory. And so I put this article Steve recently wrote that addresses those discussion points one by one. It's a fairly deep scientific read because that's where the conversation or the discussion is happening in the scientific academic community. So if you want to learn more, read that article. It's a at free access article. If you have clients who want to know, is polyvagal theory a real thing, and question using it, I send clients to that article and they come back and say, ooh, it was deep. I didn't really understand the science. I say, right, which is why I am so delighted that I am a clinician, right? That is an argument that's happening in the scientific and academic world. That's not my world. What I will say is, since I began bringing a polyvagal informed perspective to my clinical work, clients get better. They begin healing. Trauma resolves, nervous systems regulate. So the outcomes for me are what keep pointing me towards doing more of this. So let's send gratitude to Steve for his development of polyvagal theory. I love to start there and send him some gratitude, right? Without his work, none of this would be possible. None. So this is the science of connection, or the science of feeling safe enough to fall in love with life, right? This really is what polyvagal theory is. So just to give you a bit of the flow of what we'll be doing together, the basics of befriending, going to take you through just a general overview of the 3 organizing principles. And then we're going to talk about the biology of stillness. What is stillness in our nervous system experience? What are the barriers that we often bump into, and what are the benefits that come from having moments of stillness? And then we're going to look at what are the pathways to stillness. We're going to do some experiential practices together. We're going to explore how stillness lands for each of us, what happens when our system begins to become quiet. And then we're going to practice becoming safely still. We're going to spend some moments together in stillness and just track our nervous system response. When I was thinking about this workshop today, I was thinking about the state of our world and how the cues of danger are everywhere. And when we are surrounded by cues of danger, we really can't come into stillness. We can't find the safety to come into stillness. So we're going to see if we can build that together today. There are, a couple thousand of us together, and let's take a moment and just feel into this space, right? Feel into the space of several thousand nervous systems joining together, right? And I do believe that we are linked nervous system to nervous system. And so we are intentionally linking our nervous systems in this moment for the next couple of hours. This is a photolithograph of an ancient wood carving of the vagus nerve. And the vagus nerve is really where we are going to be working to be able to safely come into stillness. And I love this image. It's probably not truly anatomically correct in the way we know now, although it's, fairly close, but it shows you how the vagus, which is the prime component of your parasympathetic nervous system, and it is what helps us navigate the world, begins in the brainstem and wanders through the body. It wanders around to the front of your neck and back of your carotids, and then down your throat, your esophagus, down your lungs, your heart, into your digestive tract. And you can see all the places it goes. And it's a beautiful way to begin to enter into connection with the nervous system. Feel yourself moving down and up those pathways. This is the heart of our lived experience. Right? We often think our brains are where things begin, or our brains are running the show. But in fact, our experience begins here in the nervous system. And then the information travels this beautiful pathway, all these pathways up to the brain. It arrives in the brainstem and then travels up to the brain. And the brain's job is to make a story that makes sense of that information. Right? So the brains are the story makers, but the story is built on your autonomic state. Right? So this is what we call the intervening variable. Right? We have an event that happens. Things are happening to us all the time. Micro moment to micro moment, something is happening. And out of that event, the outcome of that event is we either move into that pathway of connection, where we engage with the world, with others, with ourselves from a state of safety and connection, or we move into that other pathway, the pathway of protection. And it's not the event that decides which pathway we're going to travel. It's our autonomic nervous system's response to that event. So that is what we call the intervening variable, right? So, we think about events, and you might think about, an event that happened in the world. Recently, there have been so many, right? I was actually watching the soccer championship last night. That's an event that happened for, hundreds of thousands of people around the world, soccer fans everywhere. The event was the same event, But the nervous system response was so different for all the people who were in the stadium, outside the stadium, watching from home, watching in groups. And this response determined what happened next, right? So again, your nervous system's response is what we want to be paying attention to. Not the event, but how did your nervous system respond to that event? So we're going to do a review of befriending your nervous system. And again, another image that I love. And you can see, does that call to you or not? Okay, one of the things we know is there's no right or wrong way. There's just the way of your nervous system. So let's say that up front and really honor that. You're going to honor the wisdom of your nervous system as we go through this time together, right? And your nervous system is going to show you a yes, a no, or a maybe. If you get a yes, dive into the practice I'm inviting you to try. If you get a no, sit with that, right? Your nervous system has a good reason for saying no, or I like to sort of translate no into not yet, right? If you get a maybe, let's explore, right? But your nervous system will clearly send you a signal. We have 3 organizing principles we're going to review. Neuroception, which is your autonomic intuition. The hierarchy, which is how your nervous system responds in service of safety and connection. And co-regulation, and the fact that we are all wired for connection. So we're going to start with neuroception. And neuroception is the word that Steve coined to describe how the nervous system listens. How does your nervous system take in information, right? Because the nervous system, remember in the image we showed, begins in your brainstem. So it's below your cortex. It's below the thinking parts of your brain. And it's working in the background all the time, making a decision, safe, unsafe, approach, avoid, connect or not. Right? It does that in the implicit world of our nervous system, right? So there was no word that described that. Perception was the closest in the English language, but perception is an aware experience. It involves the thinking parts of your brain, involves your cortex. So he created the word neuroception. So just try that on for size for a moment. Neuroception. Notice, what does it feel like when you say that out loud? Neuroception. Right? It's a lovely word, I think. Right? Neuro for neural or nervous system, and ception for awareness. So we move in this neural awareness. And the nervous system is responding again to signals of warning and welcome through 3 pathways. So neuroception uses 3 pathways. The embodied pathway, so inside our bodies. An outside pathway, so in the environment around us, environmental experience, and in between pathway, so a relational pathway. All the time, those 3 pathways are sending you information. So I'm going to show you a series of images, and I'm going to invite you to just feel what happens in your embodied experience. What do you move toward? Are you thinking, I'd like to lean into that image? Are you wanting to get away from the image? Push back against it? Or do you just detach from it? And those are the choices your nervous system has, right? So we want to start with, where does neuroception take my nervous system? Your brain is going to pretty quickly come in and give you a story to make sense of that nervous system response. And that's fine. So I'm going to invite you, if you have something to write on and something to write with, you might just take a moment and note with each slide, where did you go toward, away, against, detached? And then take a moment to think, what story did my brain just send me? What did it create? The slides, there's a series of slides, and they're sort of in pairs, because one of the things the nervous system is always wanting to do is compare and contrast, right? The nervous system loves experiences where it can compare and contrast and feel the subtle differences sometimes, sometimes the big differences that happen between two experiences. So I'm offering you two images that are in the same family. So you can get a sense of, ooh, what's the difference between them in my nervous system experience? So here's the first one. I'm going to just take a moment and notice towards, away, against, detached. And is there a story your brain offers? And then here's the comparison one. Here's this one. What happens here? Toward, away, against, detached. And the story. How about this one? Toward, away, against, detached. And a story. And this one. Same or different? How about this one? Where does this take you? Toward, away, against, detached. What's the nervous system response? And then what's the brain story? And this one. Just noticing. It's all in the category of doors, but what happens with your nervous system, with the different context, the different image? How about this one? What happens? Toward, away, against, detached. What story does your brain give you? And this one. And the last pair, this one, this colorful spiral shape. Do you lean in, move away, fight back, disconnect? What happens? And then what story does your brain offer? And the final comparison, what happens here? Same shape, different image, toward, away, against, detached. What's the story here? So just take a moment, and if you wrote things down, you can reflect on what happened from your writing. If you didn't write, you can just review the slides, reflect on the experience of your nervous system. Right? Where were the moments that you felt, oh yes, connect with, or you felt a survival response, not so safe? Just noticing. And if we were all together in a room, you'd be sharing with people around you, and what we discover is that our response to something can be very different from someone else's. Right? The same image can take us to very different places and engender a very different story, right? So with this awareness, our responsibility is to know what's happening in my nervous system, to tune in and be able to know, oh, this just brought me into connection, or this activated a survival response. And now I'm in this story, whatever the story is. So know that for ourselves, and then be curious about what's happening for somebody else. Right? It's that curiosity that then invites connection. Right? Curiosity invites connection. Here's what happened to me. That image of the multiple doors. Ooh, today, and it can change. If you look the same series of images next week, you might have a very different response. But today, when I looked at that series of doors, I felt possibility. I felt, oh, there are lots of options. So it was a toward experience for me. Just notice what it was for you. Maybe similar, maybe different. Right? And the story my brain gave me was, you have options, right? Your response to all of those doors might have been overwhelm or confusion or fear about what's going to come out. And your brain may have sent you a story. This is not safe. Get out of here. Right? Again, know what's happening for yourself and be curious about what happens for someone else. Right? You can find images online, and you could create your own slideshow, and you could do this experience with some other people and have the experience of knowing, oh, so interesting, took you in a totally different direction than it took me. Right? This is the dynamic equation that's always going on, that neuroception is bringing to us, right? I think I like simple things. I like ways to simplify and be able to engage with. So the safety danger equation is what I like to use, because it simply says when the cues of safety outweigh the cues of danger, then change is possible, right? I can be curious. I can find new pathways. I can see new options, and new stories emerge from that place. Simply when the cues of safety outweigh the cues of danger. Right? And notice I didn't say outnumber, because it's not the number of cues, it's the weight they carry in your system. We'll play with this in just a minute. So then the opposite is true as well. When the cues of danger outweigh the cues of safety, survival strategies activate. We either go to anxiety, anger, or shut down, collapse, and we get stuck in a particular survival story, right? So I'm going to invite you again. Let's do this together, right? Do this together. Divide a piece of paper in half. And on one side, we're going to put cues of safety, the other cues of danger. The first thing we want to do, remembering that every nervous system responds differently to different experiences. Language is one of those. The words safety and danger are the words I use because they're easy to translate around the world, right? But they may not fit for your nervous system, right? The word safety in and of itself is often a cue of danger to people. So the first invitation here is to find the pair of words that lands in your nervous system as what you want to use. So what word do you want to use to represent safety? What word for danger? I think earlier in the slides I used welcome and warn. I like those. Some people simply do yes, no. Connect, disconnect, approach, avoid. Give you a moment to just notice for you. What's the pair of words you've discovered fits for you? And that can change. All right. So we're going to quickly go through this just to give you a flavor of how your nervous system in this moment, as we're gathering together, is finding the neuroception of safety or danger. Right. So start with listening inside in that inside embodied pathway, right? And is there a cue of safety and a cue of danger that you discover there. And we want to at least find one of each, because the nervous system works on the both and principle. We need to both find cues of safety and identify cues of danger. So in your embodied pathway, is there a cue of safety, a cue of danger? What's happening in the internal world that you're in right now? I have bare feet on the floor, which feels really good. That's a cue of safety, right? And then it's, as I said, it's hot and I'm feeling hot and sticky, which is a cue of danger, right? So that's an inside experience for me. Let's go to the outside environmental pathway. And is there a cue of safety and a cue of danger in that pathway? What feels welcoming and safe in your environment in this moment? And what feels a little dangerous or puts you on edge a bit in the environment? Again, just noticing at least one of each. And then if we go to the between pathway, which is a little challenging maybe because I don't see any faces. I usually use faces for between, but let's go to the between, the relational pathway. And, you guys can see me, so you could use what I'm sending for cues to your nervous system, or maybe you're with other people, or you can bring someone to mind, right? And as you connect with that other human, that other being, is there a cue of safety that you feel nervous system to nervous system, and a cue of danger that you feel nervous system to nervous system? It might be in a expression on the face, the way they move, the way they sound, a gesture, the closeness can be both a cue of safety, cue of danger. Right, so this is a process that we go through to sort of identify, to bring the implicit experience of neuroception into explicit awareness. We're inviting our brain to partner with our nervous system and bring awareness to what otherwise is just happening below the level of conscious awareness. Neuroception, if it's a neuroception of safety, moves you into the state of regulation. If it's a cue of danger, if the cues of danger outweigh the cues of safety, then we move into a survival state. So this takes us to the hierarchy of response. Neuroception drives us somewhere on this hierarchy. The top of the hierarchy, ventral vagus, system of safety and connection, right? If you look to the bottom of the hierarchy, dorsal vagus, system of immobilization, protection through disappearing. Those two together, the newest place, ventral, the oldest place, dorsal, combine together to make up your parasympathetic nervous system. And those two branches of the vagus are what we are working with to become safely still. They have to work together. So we'll take a brief tour and then we'll figure out how do we help those two come together. Remember, they're all part of that beginning image that we saw, right? How do we help them communicate, hold hands, so to speak, so that we can appreciate the nourishment of stillness? In between that, we have the sympathetic nervous system, which is the system of mobilization action, right? So the newest part of our nervous system, ventral, next newest sympathetic, oldest dorsal. We're going to take just a brief tour so that we have the landmarks so that we can dive into stillness, knowing where we are. So ventral is about diaphragm upward, right? It's supradiaphragmatic. And when the ventral is managing our nervous system, we're in healthy homeostasis, right? We feel, physically and psychologically healthy. There's well-being that emerges from here. The dorsal vagus, diaphragm down, subdiaphragmatic. It has a daily function and a survival role. In its everyday role, it regulates your digestive system. It brings nutrients to nourish you. And it can do that role when it's under the guidance of ventral. When ventral is running the show, dorsal just works in the background, feeding you healthy nourishment through your digestive system. When it's called to help you survive, when it's called into a survival response, your digestion is dysregulated, first of all, but psychologically, we move out of awareness. We move out of connection. We move into shutdown and collapse. Then we have sympathetic, right? That one in the middle. And sympathetic emerges from the middle part of your spinal cord, right? Remember, we saw vagus in that opening image. It emerges from your brainstem, right? It's a cranial nerve system is what we call that. Sympathetic is a spinal nerve system. It comes from the middle part of your spinal cord, right? And it has a daily function and a survival role. In its daily function, it helps regulate our breath rhythms, our heart rhythms, and it brings us the energy we need to move through the day. And it can do that beautiful, healthy, mobilizing, energizing function when ventral is overseeing the management of your nervous system, right? So again, ventral is this essential management tool that we need. It needs to be running the show. And then sympathetic does this beautiful regulating role. When it's recruited for survival, when ventral is no longer there running the show, it's recruited for survival, we move into fight and flight. And when we move into fight and flight, we feel flooded with cortisol and adrenaline. And we know what that feels like, that response that happens. And that's because these three places in your body, your hypothalamus, pituitary, and adrenals, they're linked by a circuit. And when we move into fight and flight, that circuit gets lit up, and that's the flood of cortisol and adrenaline. So the lovely thing about each of these states is they each have their own qualities, right? What we call emergent properties. And the emergent properties of each state are only available when we're in that state. So in ventral, I have lots of wonderful regulating qualities. When I move into sympathetic, I lose access to that. In sympathetic, I'm mobilizing qualities. When I move into dorsal, I lose those. We're going to go through just briefly to get a sense of what they are. But the thing we want to remember is this is not a cognitive choice. It's a biological one. Your nervous system is making this choice for you. You don't make it, right? I often want people to remember, it's not that I'm unwilling to engage, unwilling to be present, unwilling to talk with you. I am biologically unable. So we want to remember that, not unwilling, unable. And when we can look at people in that way, when we can understand our own experience that way, it changes how we see others and how we see ourselves. All systems online, this is what it feels like, right? We navigate the world with safety and flexibility. Explore options, see possibilities, connect, create. Sympathetic's doing its lovely work, energizing us, mobilized in play, move with passion. Dorsal, digest, rest, restore. All of this is working together. They are in a beautiful homeostatic relationship. Right? And here are some of the emergent properties, right? You can see this is a world of abundance, both and. Lots of things happen, all available to us when we are here in ventral. Right? And the stories that our brain creates are stories of connection, communication, and possibility. Right? So we co-regulate and self-regulate. These four pathways of connection are what we humans have available to us. We can connect self, others, the world, and spirit. And from ventral, those pathways are alive and welcoming, and we're curious, and we walk them, and we explore them, and we deepen into them. Only from ventral. Right? We can tune in and tune out. Reach out and offer. Compassion, self-compassion, flexible, resilient. We're hopeful. This is, and I do believe, I want to say, that our nervous system longs to bring us to this place. I also believe it inherently knows how to get us here. I truly believe this, right? Nervous system knows how to bring us to this place of regulation, right? We sometimes have to uncover the pathway, find the pathway again. We create new pathways, but once we've done that and get on the pathway, nervous system's going to take us there, right? That's the hopeful understanding that I hold on to from my work with polyvagal theory. The nervous system longs to be in regulation and knows the way home to regulation. So here's what happens when the world feels too overwhelming for us, right? Too much happening, too many demands, just overwhelmed by the moment. And ventral goes offline, right? And down at the bottom, dorsal is now out of balance, so your digestion's out of balance. And sympathetic has taken over, right? We are uneasy. Uneasy is the dipping a toe in sympathetic. Rage or panic is fully immersed in it. We move out of social engagement because the nervous system is now totally focused on survival, not social connection. Fight and flight, cortisol, adrenaline. We lose our cognitive abilities. It's really fascinating. In ventral, when ventral's running the show, when ventral's online and managing our system, our prefrontal cortex is working beautifully. It's doing just what it needs to help us plan and problem solve and connect and create and all of that. When we move to sympathetic, our prefrontal goes into hypoactive mode and we no longer have access. We no longer have the ability to problem solve, to plan, to be creative with options, right? We're now in survival. Brain shuts down so that it doesn't take all the energy that we need for survival. And here are some of the emergent properties of sympathetic, right? And you can see, this is the fiery, mobilized flood of energy. It's chaotic, disorganized, overwhelming energy, right? The story is about being in an unsafe world with unsafe people, right? And those four connections, four pathways to self, others, the world, and spirit, they're still there, but they're disrupted, right? They're disrupted, and I only hear the inner voices that are judging, criticizing. I look at others and see them as not okay, as bad, as needing fixing. My relationships are distorted. We do not treat the world well when we are in sympathetic. We don't care for our world, for the environment, for nature when we are in sympathetic. And our connection with spirit becomes disrupted, becomes co-opted, becomes used for survival rather than for grace or nourishment. And here at the bottom, when sympathetic can't solve the problem, or when the problem just continues to exist and the nervous system can only stay in sympathetic for whatever amount of time your system can do that, at some point it reaches its end and you go to dorsal, right? So this is the pathway of last resort for your nervous system. When all else fails, nervous system will take you to dorsal. So now ventral and sympathetic are both offline. All that chaotic, disorganized flood of energy in sympathetic is now drained from your system, right? Your body's gone into conservation mode. So you're zoned out, shut down, you dissociate in some way, you disappear, collapse, and we suffer with digestive problems, right? This is dorsal. Again, the last survival response your nervous system has. And let's think what happens here. Right? We have now lost connection to self, others, the world, and spirit. We had it in ventral. It was distorted in sympathetic. We've lost it in dorsal, right? We feel disconnected. There's some sense of floaty, numb, foggy, untethered in the world experience. There's a numbness, a fogginess that happens, right? Alone, lost, abandoned. That's what my clients told me. So those three words ended up on all my slides. Alone, lost, abandoned. And they would add, where no one will ever find me. That's the deep dorsal experience, and safety and hope feel unreachable. Right? The first flavor of dorsal is, I'm just going through the motions. I can still do what needs to be done, but I don't have the energy to care. And I'm not really here doing it. That's the first flavor, right? The stories here have some plot line around disappearing, disconnecting, and despairing. So before we go to the co-regulation, the third organizing principle. Just stop for a moment and just notice your nervous system, right? You're taking in a lot of information. For most of you, I imagine this is review, which the more we can review and deepen, the better. For some of you, this may be new information. So just notice, what is your nervous system needing in this moment to help you be able to be here, be present, be in that ventral place, so that we can begin to look for this third organizing principle. We just take a moment. I often put my hand in my heart, connects me to what's happening inside, right? That internal pathway is not the easiest pathway for me to follow. I'm much better at what's happening outside in the environment and what's happening between. So I've got the environmental pathway going strong. My between pathway is suffering because I can't see anybody. I know you're there, but I can't see. Every now and then I see some hearts floating up the side or some thumbs up, and it's like, oh, there are people here, right? Thank you for that. Whoever's sending that, thank you. So that's the between, right? Yeah. So now I'm just, look at that flood of those. Thank you. It's lovely. So we all just take a moment and feel into our own nervous systems. The question to ask yourself always is, what does my nervous system need in this moment? What does it need in this moment? Right? And just listen for a moment and see, what does it need? And remember, a reminder, you can go back and listen to this. You don't have to take it all in now. It's available for you to go back and listen to. So maybe that's a reassurance for your nervous system. So thank you for all those sweet emojis, which takes us right to where we want to be. We're wired for connection. And again, here's another image. And just notice where this image lands for you. To me, that felt very sort of sweet and connecting. Right? It felt like these were two people who were connected in safety. All right. So this is Steve's definition of trauma, and I think it's a beautiful definition for the nervous system. Trauma is when we have a disruption in connection, when we can't depend on connection, right? That's traumatic for the nervous system, right? So, if we have lost people in our lives or have unpredictable people, our nervous system feels it, and it usually brings a survival energy to life, right? And there's another open access article that you can read about, the science of safety, which is what Steve calls polyvagal theory. So here is co-regulation, which we call a biological imperative, which means if we don't have it, when we come into the world, we don't survive. A biological imperative is something you have to survive. And the interesting thing about connection is that, yes, in our early moments, our early months, we need others to be there to care for us. Until the day you die, you need others to be in safe connection with, to fully experience a life of well-being, right? So if I read you these three sentences, just notice, how does your nervous system respond today as we're here in this moment? We are wired for connection. We wish for connection. We wait for connection. And just take those statements in, just notice, where do they land for you? How does this knowing that you are wired, wishing, and waiting for connection land in your system? So if we go back to the hierarchy that we just, took a tour of, maybe these sentences land as a story of friendship. That would be a ventral experience. Ooh, there are people I can reach out to. It's hopeful. I have options. It's a story of yes, I have friends in my world. I can find more. Maybe it landed as a story of I'm relentlessly driven to find connection. That's that sympathetic, driven energy, right? I can't find it. I have to have it. I'm missing it, right? That's a sympathetic story. Or maybe it landed in your system as feeling hopeless. Why bother? No one's there. Don't reach out. And that's that dorsal story, right? And depending on where you are, what else is happening in your life in this moment, those three simple sentences will land in one of those places, right? Will land in one of those places, right? And, if you reflect on the past, couple months, you may have traveled through several of those stories. I know I have. I've traveled through all three of those. In my system, in this moment today, they land as a story of friendship. There's a hope, there's a curiosity, there's an interest in finding friendship, right? But if I reflect over the past, months, I have been driven to connect because I've been, had that loneliness experience, driven to connect with a sympathetic story of you have to or else you'll die. And then I've also been to the hopeless dorsal places. No one's going to be there. No one will understand. Don't bother. Right. And that ride between the three states happens for all of us all the time. It's normal and expected. So again, just notice for yourself, what's the journey you've been on, and remind yourself normal and expected. Right. All right. So our nervous system is always sending and searching for cues of safety and danger. So our work is to stay tuned into this conversation. That's our work. How do we stay tuned in? Because if I turn away from the autonomic information, I then don't know where the story has come from. I'm just going to be taken on a ride by my brain, because my brain is still getting that information as they're creating a story. But the story that our brains can create are sometimes pretty fantastic, right? I know my brain can make up some pretty amazing stories that reflect the sense of energy coming from my body, the body's signals, but don't always get the situation correct, right? So here's your social engagement system. Again, this last piece of review before we think about stillness, because this social engagement system, under the control of ventral, is what allows us to come into connection, right? 5 cranial nerves that are looking for cues through eyes, ears, voice, face, and head movements. That's what they're looking through. Is it amazing how this is just wired into your biology? You don't have to do anything. In fact, you can't not do it, right? Your eyes, ears, the way you hear voice, the way you speak, and your face and head movements, all of that is communicating, am I safe to come into connection with? Or should you stay away, right? And so we can intentionally use those pathways to send a message of welcome, or not now, stay away. And through neuroception, we're getting those cues all the time, right? Right? We know if someone's safe to approach. We know. Biologically, nervous system wise, we know. They may say, yes, your nervous system may feel no, right? And again, we want to tune into the wisdom of our nervous system, right? Listen to what it's telling us. It's going to be especially important. I'm going to take a moment before we come into, exploring the biology of stillness. I want to take a moment and just sit here for a moment, right? And just notice stillness is a very complicated nervous system experience, right? And as we enter into exploring stillness, you may discover that stillness is a bridge too far for your nervous system in this moment, right? Because our nervous systems create patterns to keep us safe, right? And one of the things we know about movement, and, if you think, do you have sort of a sympathetic edge going on right now? Do you feel a bit alarmed, or a bit as if I can't sit still, or I can't settle, I can't focus, right? I'm sort of, looking all over the place, right? That's your sympathetic nervous system saying it's not safe to relax, right? And so we can't fight against the sympathetic nervous system. We can get to know the sympathetic nervous system and figure out what are the cues of danger that are activating that, and what are the cues of safety it might bring in. That's going to be our work the rest of our time together, right? Is to figure out, how do I balance the safety danger equation so I can explore stillness, right? Because if you feel unsafe, you will not go to stillness. It will be unavailable for you, okay? So just take a moment and hand on heart if you want, or if you're a breath person, you can breathe the kind of breath that brings you into this moment, into presence, right? Stillness also requires us to be here, to be present, right?